Albert Alberto Alfonso was born in France. He grew up in Bidart. He trained at an hotel school in Biarritz before moving to the UK to manage hotels. At one point, he was a general manager at 375 Kensington High Street, a luxury residential estate in West London, with apartments and penthouses. But by 2024, he'd gained British citizenship, and he was working as a swimming instructor, and he was training to be a lifeguard at the Motor Club gym in Acton, West London. He's described as funny, authoritative, and motivated. It was back in the day, while working at 375 Kensington High Street, that Albert met Paul Longworth. By 2024, Paul, a British national, had recently retired from being a handyman by trade. Paul is described by friends and neighbours as extremely kind. He's a nice, warm, generous person. Always polite. Always buys you a drink. Sit down and have a chat. Together they formed a relationship. And decades later, in February 2023, they entered a civil partnership. They lived together, and had done for years, in a flat on Scots Road in Shepherd's Bush, West London. They were described by neighbours as a friendly couple who seemed happy together. Friends and neighbours knew Albert and Paul as a devoted, affectionate pair, genuinely fond of one another. They were best friends. They didn't have huge amounts of friends and family around them, and they were each other's rocks, each other's everything. In 2024, Paul was 71, which makes him 9 years older than 62-year-old Albert. Something that they both had in common was they were both fostered as children. Something not so common between them was their love for privacy. It said Paul wasn't as open about his sexuality and referred to Albert as his brother. Albert, on the other hand, was quite open about his interests in extreme sex, often arranging consensual encounters outside of his relationship. Paul was very much aware of Albert's outside sexual interests, and he accepted them lovingly, understanding they were a part of his personal life, and had been long since before they formed this civil partnership. By all accounts, Paul did not participate in these activities himself, and he also had no conflict with Albert doing them, and they never fell out about it. Despite these outside encounters, Albert and Paul remained a loving, committed couple in their day-to-day lives. And that's actually what brings us on to our third person, Yostin Andrés Mosquera. But before we go any further, I need to do my disclaimer. This is a true crime case. It's a real story involving real people. So although I do want you to comment and I do want you to share, please do be sensitive as you do so. I don't need hate in my comments, and I don't need people being horrible just for the sake of being horrible. Born on the 8th of March 1990, Yostin is a Colombian national. Quick math, in 2024, he was 34-year-old, which makes him literally half the age of Albert and Paul. He was a pornographic performer, meaning he did cam shows and porn, pretty much whatever you wanted him to do for money. Yostin had worked in the adult entertainment industry for several years, apparently since about 2017, posting explicit videos under aliases such as I Am Black Master and Mr. Dick 20 centimeters. If you're wondering, these videos are extremely low budget and low quality videos. There's lots with him on his own, there's about 2 or 3 with a woman, and then there's a few others with him with mates and 1 or 2 women. He's far from what you'd class as a star. In 2024, he was living in Medellin, Colombia. He had 5 brothers and 1 sister, who died a few years before. He also had 2 children, and he spoke little to no English. So as you've probably guessed, it was Albert's interests that connected him and Paul to Yostin. Albert and Yostin started speaking over Skype in about 2012. 5 years on, by 2017, Albert started paying him for his videos, which became more extreme over time. While it seemed Albert was in it for the sex, Yostin was just in it for the money. Albert would eventually open his entire life to a man whom a relationship was, in reality, just transactional. Between May 2022 and February 2024, Albert sent Yostin a total of $7,735 across 72 payments. That's an equivalent of about £5,800. Halfway through that time period, in 2023, they finally met in person when Yostin travelled to England for the first time. After that, their transactional relationship did continue. Their acts, their playtime together, usually involved domination and degradation of Albert. He was in the submissive role and referred to Yostin as master. In the 5 months between January 2024 and the 19th of June 2024, Albert had transferred £928 via MoneyGram, which is a company that provides international transfer services. In turn, Yostin posted porn across 4 different websites, including more than 100 videos and images using his pseudonyms. Although Albert was by far his best client, other customers were also asking for sex videos from Yostin. Between the 30th of June 2020 and the 12th of June 2024, he'd earned $2,682.90 from them. It also turns out that Albert was also using these clips of Yostin that he sent him to earn money online. Albert's bank statements showed that he'd received more than £17,500 between the 2nd of September 2022 and the 12th of July 2024 from a company that operates an extreme porno website. Now, let's rewind a little bit to Yostin's first visit to the UK in October 2023. He stayed in Albert's London home and the travel had been paid for by Albert. During his stay, Yostin visited Madame Tussauds, took a trip on an open-top bus, and went on a boat river trip down the River Thames. I can't be sure, but I assume, as with later trips, all expenses were paid for by Albert and Paul. In December 2023, Yostin had sent Albert a sex video where he's dressed as Father Christmas. Then in March 2024, Albert and Paul went to Colombia. More specifically, they went to Cartagena. And guess what? Albert paid for Yostin to come and meet him there. By June, Yostin was back. This time, it was for an extended stay, with an expectation of him staying for about a month. And of course, Yostin was staying there at their apartment at all expenses paid. And these expenses were quite nice. Albert had arranged a guest membership for him at his gym. He'd set him up on the WhatsApp group for his five-a-side football team. And he'd even enrolled him on a 4-week English language course. The 3 of them also travelled to Brighton for a day trip, visiting the pier where Yostin was filmed on the zipwire. After 12 years of talking, then all this frequent visits, while the couple paid for most if not all of his expenses, including the shared holiday in Yostin's home country, the 3 of them had seemingly developed quite a good friendship. Even neighbours noticed that they'd seemed to enjoy each other's company socially. But this visit, in June-July 2024, was very different. In the weeks leading up to July, Yostin had begun plotting to kill Albert and Paul. One of his first searches was him looking up the value of the couple's property in London, where on the head is a knock fatal, hammer killer. He also made searches about Jack the Ripper and apparently other London serial killers. He looked up poisonings. He looked up to buy a chest freezer from Facebook Marketplace. He was asking questions about delivery options, and searches were made for deep freezer, chest freezer, large indoor freezer, outdoor freezer. He was really dedicated on finding a freezer to buy. He used YouTube and Google in his search to find out where is best to hit somebody on the head for a fatal hit. Then came Monday, the 8th of July 2024. Yostin had fully planned this out. The plan consisted of 2 phases in the same day. 2 murders, sometime around midday, approximately 12:30 in the afternoon. While 62-year-old Albert was away at work, Yostin attacked 71-year-old Paul in their apartment flat. He hit him from behind with a hammer, delivering repeated blows that shattered his skull. Defensive wounds on Paul's hands indicated that he desperately tried to fend off the attack. Yostin then hid Paul's body by lifting up a mattress on a divan bed and placing a corpse inside the storage space. He then laid in wait for Albert to return home, which would be later that evening. He was preparing the next ambush. While he waited, he googled how long it would take for a corpse to decompose. He also accessed his boarding pass for his flight home to Colombia. When Albert came back from work in the early evening, he was totally unaware of what had happened to Paul. To him, it was a good day. It was like any other, but he was really looking forward to getting home and enjoying his time with his young guest. As he'd expected, Yostin had helped set up a video camera in his bedroom. This video camera was expected to record their encounter, something that was quite common between them. So Albert gets home and him and Yostin go to the bedroom, which is all set up and ready for their playtime. Record is pressed and they get underway. During their activities, while Albert was busy and distracted and very vulnerable, Yostin reached over to a nearby table and grabbed the knife that he'd hid under a cloth. He then repeatedly stabbed him and slashed his throat. Albert sustained at least 13 stab wounds to his torso, neck, face and other parts of his body. While doing so, Yostin asked Albert, "Do you like it?" as he struggled and screamed. The camera continued to record the entire attack. It also continued to record the aftermath, the almost aftermath. As Albert's laying, dying, bleeding out, Yostin got up, singing and dancing. Naked. He danced over to Albert's computer and phones. He accessed a spreadsheet where Albert and Paul had stored all the online banking information. He attempted to log on to a number of their online bank accounts, and he unsuccessfully attempted to send himself £4,000 to his account in Colombia. He also left the flat briefly to withdraw cash using Albert's bank cards at a nearby ATM to withdraw around £900. His plan was perfectly on schedule. Soon he'd be on his flight home, but first he needed to get rid of their bodies. On Tuesday, the 9th of July, the day after the murders, a large chest freezer, which he'd bought before the killings, was delivered to the home. Using knives and what the pathology said must have been other tools, but I don't think they've been recovered, Yostin decapitated and dismembered Paul and Albert's bodies inside the flat. Some of the body parts, including both victims' severed heads, were placed into the new freezer, which is set up in the hallway in the apartment. Other remains were packed into 2 large suitcases, which Yostin had to bound with straps due to how much they were bulging. His plan was to transport these cases far from London and dispose of them by throwing them off a bridge into a water, therefore hiding any evidence. To do this, Yostin planned to travel 120 miles away. So the next day, Wednesday the 10th of July, 2 days after the murders, Yostin set to execute his disposal scheme. He first went online and arranged a car share, but they struggled to fit the cases in the car and jokingly asked, "God, these are heavy. Is there a body in there?" Anyway, this car share ended up not happening, so Yostin ended up getting a taxi. He then travelled 115 miles from London to Bristol, arriving in the Clifton area near the famous Clifton Suspension Bridge at around 11:30 p.m. This was just as the pubs were starting to close, after England had beat Netherlands in the Euros 2024 semi-final football match. So there's plenty of people about. He had the driver stop near the mall pub and continued towards the bridge on foot for the final stretch. And if you hadn't noticed, his plan isn't really going to plan. The car share failed and now he's had to get there and now it's busy. Well, this bit didn't go smoothly either, because neither him or his luggage went unnoticed. Local residents watched him struggling with the weight of these cases that were bulging, and they noticed that there were red liquid seeping out of them. Again, referring to however the cases looked, one bystander even jokingly shouted, "That looks really heavy. What have you got in there? A body?" Which I've just noticed, we joke about that a lot in the UK. Yostin, probably not fully understanding what was said, nervously claimed that the liquid was just oil, and even chuckled in a desperate attempt to try and act normal. Just imagine how nervous he is at this point, by the way. Obviously, he's nervous to start with, but then his car share fails because they're too heavy, and then he's got this red liquid seeping out, and then there's someone shouting about a body being in his case. His heart must have been beating at 1,000,000 beats per minute, if he's got an heart. But things only got worse for Yostin that night. It weren't much longer, just as he's approaching the bridge, that a cyclist crosses the bridge, and he saw Yostin standing next to a large red case. Thinking that he were a lost tourist, he just stopped to see if he were okay. He noticed, as well as the large red suitcase, a few metres away there was also a silver trunk type of suitcase. Yostin told the cyclist that it was from Cumbria and that the suitcase contained car parts. Now, you see, Clifton Suspension Bridge has security via CCTV, thermal cameras, and that they've got video analytics, and there's also physical patrols. And this security noticed. They noticed these really heavy cases with something leaking from them. Again, Yostin passed it off as oil. But then when they shone the torches at this case, he just left them and ran away. Someone, and I think it was a cyclist, I'm not fully sure, had already started filming him because of how suspicious they were being. By the looks of the footage, he started following him, so then Yostin tries to run over to him, knock the phone out of his hand, and continue to flee.
Mira. Mi jefe es muy malo.
It was reported that as he fled, he said, "My boss is a bad man," in Spanish, prompting speculation that this were in some way gang related. The bridge security are looking at these cases, but looking at the liquid, they're going, "That's not oil, we need to call 999. Here is how that call went.
Emergency location.
Clifton Suspension Bridge.
What's the emergency?
Right, we're going to need some police up here quite urgently, I think. We had a gentleman up here who was dragging a case behind him, a black gentleman. At the time we were speaking to him, he didn't speak English, and a guy on a bike had stopped who actually spoke Spanish, so we were trying to have a conversation with him. He says the case of the wheels are broken and what have you. He says there's car parts and the case is broken, it's really heavy and there's blood coming out of it.
Right,
it looks like there's blood coming out of the case. He then said there were two cases, so he went up the road to get the second case. The guy on the bike, who's just, remember the public followed him, the guy has now run off. We're now with the case. I mean, it might not be blood. He said it was car parts, oil. It doesn't smell of that at all. It looks like blood to us.
Do the tags on it have any names or anything on them?
Yes. The guy says to Mr. Albert.
Yostin had abandoned these two cases on the footpath at the Lee Woods end of the Clifton Suspension Bridge as he ran off into the darkness. Of course, inside those cases, left in plain sight, were the partial remains of Paul Longworth and Albert Alfonso. Responding officers soon made their gruesome discovery. The suitcases contained these human limbs and a torso, confirming that they had definitely stumbled upon a double homicide. The bridge was immediately shut down and treated as a major crime scene. A police officer and ground units were sent to search the area throughout the night. They were looking for Yostin throughout all these woods and all this area, but they didn't manage to find him. However, critical clues were left at the scene and they were retrieved very quickly. Now, if you think trying to dispose of two cases that are full of human body parts off a bridge that's got 24-hour security is stupid, then surely you'll think that leaving the tag on the bags is very stupid. This tag didn't just have Albert's name on it, it also had his address. Although it must have been an absolute nightmare for Yostin, it must have been a major godsend for the police. It gave them an absolutely massive clue of where to start looking for the identity of the victims, if not the murderer too. By the following morning, Thursday the 11th of July 2024, the investigation had rapidly widened. The Met Police in London went to Albert and Paul's apartment on Scots Road, and it was there that soon, during a search of their flat, they discovered both victims' decapitated heads stored in the chest freezer in the hallway, along with other body parts that Yostin had left. The suspected murder weapons, including a bloody knife and a hammer, were also recovered at the scene. With the victims now identified and the primary crime scene secured, the Met Police formally linked the London murders to the Bristol suitcase remains. That same day, detectives announced that they were searching for a single suspect and were not currently looking for anyone else in connection with this case. Given that these two victims were a gay couple, the case was initially classed as a potential hate crime under the national guidelines, although investors noted that there were no clear evidence of homophobic motive at that stage. The police also engaged the London LGBTQ+ independent advisory group for guidance due to the sensitive nature of the case. By Friday, the 12th of July, 2024, the police were certain enough about the main suspect that they publicly named Yostin as the suspect in the double murder. CCTV images were released and a plea for information from anyone that had seen him were made. By now, it was evident to the police that he had fled the immediate area of the bridge on foot and could be attempting to leave Bristol or even the country. The clock was ticking and a coordinated manhunt was underway. The next day, Saturday the 13th of July 2024, he was spotted and arrested outside Bristol Temple Meads railway station as he seemingly attempted to leave the city in the early hours. Yostin did not resist his arrest. Here is the footage of that arrest.
I've got a hand, mate.
Go.
Yeah. I can say the words then. I need secure.
Go.
Stay down, John. Yeah.
Oh my God. What happened? Oh,
Secure.
I'm sorry, mate.
What happened?
Move your legs out to the front. Sit up.
At this time, mate, you're under arrest on suspicion of murder. You don't have to say anything, but it may harm your defence if you do not mention when questioned, something you later rely in court. Anything you do say may be given evidence. Do you understand?
No. What?
You are currently under arrest for murder, okay?
What's your name, mate?
What?
What's your name? Nombre.
Jot.
Jot?
Yeah.
Jot or Joss?
Jot.
Surname? Jot what?
Jot. Mosquera.
Mosquera?
Yeah.
Shortly after the arrest, custody was transferred to the Met Police in London and he was formally charged with 2 counts of murder. While being questioned, he made no comment to all questions about the murders of Albert and Paul. Over the following months, investigators and prosecutors continued to build this case. The Met Police pieced together extensive forensic and digital evidence tying Yostin to the murders. For example, the CCTV footage from Albert and Paul's apartment buildings, the video recordings from Albert's bedroom, which literally recorded the murders. Digital forensics on Yostin's laptop further confirmed premeditation and the motive, all the internet searches and the spreadsheet of financial information, and all the forensic evidence from the flat and the cases. So the trial began at the Old Bailey on the 29th of April 2025. At the outset, Yostin entered a plea that would foreshadow his defence strategy. He admitted to the manslaughter of Albert, claiming diminished responsibility, you got it, and loss of self-control. But he denied murdering Paul Longworth. He was effectively blaming Albert for Paul's death. He did not plead guilty to either of the murder charges. Bearing in mind, diminished responsibility is manslaughter. But the prosecution knew it was murder, and they were adamant that they were going to get convicted for it. So they rejected the manslaughter plea and proceeded for the full case, in full charge for double murder. Jurors had to endure graphic evidence. And if you haven't clicked on, the prosecution made Yostin look stupid in the fact that he was claiming diminished responsibility, but the murders were actually, one of the murders were actually filmed on video, and they'd got the video. The court also had to go through Albert's personal life, his private life. Neighbours testified that the pair was a happy, loving couple, and Albert wouldn't hurt Paul. As the trial progressed into May, the prosecution presented a detailed timeline of Yostin's plans and actions. Jurors saw CCTV clips and heard about Yostin's internet search history. For instance, CCTV proved that Albert was at work when Paul was killed, debunking Yostin's initial implications that Albert might have been responsible for Paul's death. The trial was going absolutely brilliantly. The prosecution had done a great job proving it was simply impossible for Yostin's version of events to be true. They'd got this case without a doubt. It was an easy win. But then, on the 15th of May, over 2 weeks into the case collapsed. Just like that. The judge discharged the jury and halted the trial because there were problems with some of the computer evidence. Specifically, difficulties in verifying the exact timestamp of Yostin's laptop search history, which had been presented as key evidence, which would have meant any conviction wouldn't have been secured. Because this ambiguity could affect the fairness of the trial, the judge concluded, we simply have to resolve this before we have a fair trial. That was absolutely detrimental. The issues would have to be resolved, and then the entire trial would have to start over with a new jury. I mean, this was brilliant for Yostin, because the prosecution had him nailed. Now the defence knows all the tricks the prosecution's got up its sleeves, and they can adjust and come back to the new jury with a new stance. And with that said, the retrial began on the 30th of June 2025, with the same judge, different jury. For a large part, the trial was the same, but this time Yostin put forward an expanded narrative as his defence. Taking the stand in his own defence with the use of a translator, he claimed that he'd been a victim of coercion and SA by Albert. He alleged that during the stay, Albert awed him every day and threatened to harm his family in Colombia if he didn't comply. He continued his claim that it was Albert who killed Paul in a fit of rage or conflict, and that Yostin had only killed Albert in a preemptive self-defence, out of fear for his own life. Oh look, we have another victim that's actually a murderer. It was a game changer. However, the prosecution rose to this challenge and tackled this new story. They pointed out, for example, that Albert had no reason to kill Paul given their loving relationship, and all evidence indicated that Paul was killed while Albert was at work. Additionally, Albert's friends and family massively denied that he was capable of the violence that Yostin described. The jury learned that Yostin's accusations did not align with any prior report. Instead, they appeared only after he'd seen the strength of the evidence against him. After 3 weeks' worth of trial, on the 21st of July 2025, it took the jury just 5 hours and 3 minutes of deliberation to unanimously find Yostin guilty of both murders. Apparently, Yostin stood impassively as the guilty verdict was read. I'm not quite sure why, but it took a long time for the sentencing after the verdict had been passed. It was on the 24th of October 2025. Literally yesterday, as I'm reading this. Of course, it had to be a life sentence. And in finding the starting point, the judge said, if I conclude each murder involved a substantial degree of planning or premeditation, or each murder involved sexual or sadistic conduct, the starting point would be a whole life order. If I conclude that the murder was done for gain, or were of two people, the starting point is 30 years. So he didn't really give us a good starting point for that, but he went on to say that the aggravating factors were things like there were two people, it was murder for gain, Paul Longworth was 71 years old and in poor health, so he was particularly vulnerable. There was a significant degree of planning and premeditation. There was gross dismemberment of both men's bodies. And with that said, it's such that I might either have imposed a minimum term of approaching 50 years or decided your case merited a whole life order. However, because of Yostin's lack of previous convictions, both in the UK and Colombia, the judge sentenced him to life in prison with a minimum of 42 years minus time served, leaving the minimum term to be 40 years and 264 days. Yostin had been wearing a wooden crucifix necklace during the sentencing. But before you go, there is one that weren't a laugh of funny, that would laugh of disbelief, because there is something else I need to tell you. Before this sentencing, Yostin was actually sentenced to something else. Because while the police were looking for evidence against him, they were looking for his laptop for digital evidence, they found something which Yostin pled guilty for before this trial started. And that was the possession of indecent images of relevant children. Sorry, I have to be careful how I say it. I don't want to get done off YouTube. He had about 1,500 Category A images on his laptop, 750 Category B images, and 4,000 Category C images. For that, he received a concurrent sentence of 16 months. There we go. That is everything that I've got on this case. There is possibly going to be more information that will come out after this, because like I said, this case didn't finish till yesterday. That's when he was sentenced. The reason I've got it done so quick, you'll see there's other videos of people that like released it 6 months ago and whatever. And these people have released it without the sentencing being done. I've released it after the sentencing. I'd already got a lot of information ready. You guys, you've probably already seen other cases on it, because this won't be out now for a week because I've got to edit it and everything else. I always say this, I don't want to tell people not to trust. I don't want to tell people not to let people in, because I don't believe that's a world we should be building. I don't believe in negativity under the guise of safety. If we put safety first, I'm a massive privacy advocate, so I would very proudly say we can't put safety before anything else. But I don't think there is much lessons to be learned here, is there? They'd gone the right way. They'd been talking from 2012, 2017. Then it were a transactional thing, and then they met several times, and they'd been really good to him. Just greed, in really despicable, brutal greed that's just so unnecessary. So I suppose the lesson to learn here is, no matter how much we've got to know someone, when they're in our homes and when we're vulnerable, know that we're vulnerable. And I don't know, I think that is the only thing we can learn from this. Not to not let us guard down, not to not invite people in, just know that we're vulnerable. Because, especially in this case, alright, they've been talking for 12 years, but for the first, 10 of them, it was just online. Anyone can be anything online. They have no idea who he is. So you can't say they've known each other for 12 years. And this is what we're always trying to get through to our kids these days. Our eldest, he was like, oh yeah, I'm going on holiday with some people I know. How'd you know him? Oh, we talk online. So you don't know him then. You know what I mean? There's that woman that's just had to apologise because she pretended to be guilty. She was doing that in real life. Just imagine what you can do online. And there's so many cons about these long relationships where they get money and money and money and money. Do you know what I mean? And I suppose if your relationship comes from a transactional relationship, if it's money orientated, you always have to be a bit suspicious that that person is always going to want more money. Not saying that person's always going to kill for more money, but you know what I mean? I'm rambling. So all I'm going to say is, I love you. Take care of yourself. Take care of those around you. And I'll see you real soon.